Hi there. In this lesson we're going to be looking at factoring trinomials, and this is part one of factoring trinomials. We'll take a look at some more of these in a later lesson. But if we consider the following two examples, if we want to factor these, and we know about factoring by grouping, I'm going to factor these by grouping. I've got four terms here. So this first one I'm going to factor by grouping by putting these in groups of 2. So I put them in groups of 2. Out of the first group, I can factor out a 2x. So I factor out the 2x, and that leaves me with an x and a plus 2. Out of the second group, again, typically when I see a negative symbol right here for my first term in the second group, I'm going to factor out a negative, so I'm going to factor out a negative 3. And if I divide out a negative 3, it leaves me with an x and a plus 2. And now I see a common polynomial of x plus 2, so I rewrite that common polynomial in one location. And when I rewrite that, if I take away those x plus 2's, I'm left with a 2x and a minus 3. So my other factor is a 2x and a minus 3. Okay? If I look at the next one, I'm going to approach it the same way. So I'm going to do my factoring by grouping. I group the first two together. I group the second two together. Out of the first two, I can factor out a 2 and an x. So I factor out a 2x. That leaves me with a 2x and a plus 5 when I divide it out. Out of the second group, remember, factoring by grouping, I have to factor something out. And in this case, the only thing I can factor out is a 1. It's the only thing that divides evenly into each of these, and it's going to be a positive 1, so I'm going to factor out a positive 1. Again, I have to factor something out. If I divide out the 1, it leaves me with a 2x plus 5. But now I can see the common polynomial of 2x plus 5. I rewrite that in one location. So I have my 2x plus 5 as one of my factors. My other factor then is what I'm left with, the 2x and the plus 1. With a 2x plus 1. And now that one's factored completely. And we start off with these two examples today because these two examples are actually trinomials. Okay? They don't look like trinomials at first glance. If I were to take away these parentheses, if we look a little bit closer, I have like terms in the middle right here. I could combine these like terms, the 4x and the negative x, and that would give me a 2x squared plus x minus 6. So this is really a trinomial that I just factored by grouping. It was a trinomial that's being represented as having 4 terms, and I was able to do factoring by grouping. Here it's essentially the same thing. I've got a 10x plus a 2x. This is actually a 4x squared plus a 12x plus 5. So again, it's a trinomial that's being represented by 4 terms so that I can do factoring by grouping. And the idea here is factoring by grouping won't work with 3 terms because I have to put them in groups of 2. But if I represent it in terms of 4 terms, then I can do factoring by grouping. So really, factoring trinomials is essentially going to be the process of splitting that middle term into 2 separate terms so that I can do factoring by grouping. All right? And the question really becomes, how do we know to split this 1x into a positive 4x and a minus 3x? How do I know to split this 12x into a 10x and a 2x? Okay, because there's virtually a million things I could split these into. So I want to find out those exact 2 numbers that I need to split this into in order to do my factoring by grouping. And here's the approach that we're going to take. All right, so to factor a trinomial, really most of this process is going to be coming up with those 2 values, those 2 numbers that we're going to split the middle term into so we can do factoring by grouping. All right? That's what these first 3 steps are about. So the first thing we do is build a bridge. And that's not an official term. That's just a nice way of reminding myself, or a nice way of being able to remember that I'm going to multiply the first coefficient by the last coefficient. Okay? In other words, the first term by the last term. First number times the last number, and I come up with this bridge number, this magic number that I'm gonna play with. Okay? So I build a bridge. I multiply the first number by the last number. And then I want to find 2 numbers that multiply together to give me that bridge number, that value I just came up with in step 1, but add together to give me that middle term. Okay? So I take the first term and the last term and I multiply their coefficients. And then I need a number that multiplies to that, but adds to the middle coefficient. That's the only one I haven't used yet. Once I have those 2 magic numbers, I'm going to rewrite the middle term using those two values I just came up with. And by doing that, what I'll have done is taken this thing from having 3 terms to having 4 terms, which then means I can do my factoring by grouping. Okay? And that's the last step here. All right? So again, I build a bridge. I come up with 2 numbers that multiply to the bridge but add to the middle coefficient. I rewrite the middle term using those values as coefficients. And now I can factor by grouping. Okay? For example, if I look at something like this. Again, I call it building a bridge here. I'm going to take the first coefficient times the last coefficient. And the signs are included here. We're always going to include the signs. So I'm doing this positive 2 times this negative 6. All right? That's what I mean by building a bridge. So 2 times negative 6 is a negative 12. That's step 1. Step 2, I need to come up with 2 numbers that multiply together to give me the negative 12, but add together to give me this middle term. And this middle coefficient right here is a 1, a positive 1. So 2 numbers that multiply to a negative 12 but add to a positive 1 are going to be a positive 4 and a negative 3. They multiply to a negative 12. They add to a positive 1. So that's step 2. Step 3, I'm going to rewrite this middle term. I'm going to split this 1x up into a 4x and a minus 3x. Okay, because 4x minus 3x is a 1x. Everything else just kind of tags along for the ride. And now what I've done is I've rewritten this trinomial as 4 separate terms. So now I can do factoring by grouping. Out of the first 2 terms, I can factor out a 2x, which leaves me with an x plus 2. Out of the second 2 terms, I can factor out a negative 3, which leaves me with an x plus 2. And now I have the x plus 2 in common. I can rewrite that in a single location. And after I do that, the values, or the terms that I'm left with, are the 2x and the minus 3. So my second factor is the 2x minus 3. That's factoring by grouping when we're dealing with a trinomial. Okay? We rewrite it as 4 terms, and then we factor by grouping. All right? If I look at the second one, I'm doing the same thing. I build a bridge. This is a positive 4 times a positive 5, which is a positive 20. So now 2 numbers that multiply to a positive 20 but add to a positive 12 are going to be a 10 and a 2, a positive 10 and a positive 2. So now I'm going to split up that middle term using those as coefficients. So instead of a 12x, I'm going to rewrite it as a 10x plus 2x, because that's the same thing as a 12x. Everything else just tags along for the ride. And now I have a trinomial that I've split into 4 terms. I can do my factoring by grouping. I group the first 2 terms together. I group the second 2 terms together. Out of the first 2 terms, I can factor out a 2x, which leaves me with a 2x plus 5. Out of the second 2 terms, I have to factor something out, so I factor out a positive 1, which leaves me with a 2x plus 5. And now I see that common polynomial again. So my 2 factors are the 2x plus 5. And when I remove that, it leaves me with a 2x plus 1. And that's how we factor trinomials. We use factoring by grouping.